Okay, everybody, we're back. Today I'm doing a tier maker jobs list because, somebody asked for it. So it was actually very nostalgic to put together this list of all the jobs I've had. I think there's about 17 here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Yeah, 17. And we're going S, A, B, C, F. No D tier. Just going straight to F. And starting off with dishwashing in college. This was my first legit job. And it is F tier. This is one of the worst jobs I've ever had. This was washing dishes for a cafeteria, an industrial grade cafeteria kitchen that fed like 8,000 people a day. So if you can imagine a hallway that you have to walk down to get to the dishwashing station, and then the station is facing back the way you came, and then the far wall right behind you, so as you're washing dishes, the wall behind you is a conveyor belt. And on the other side of that wall is a cafeteria that fed 8,000 people a day. So that conveyor belt is where people dump their shit, and it comes around the wall and then gets knocked off into this big trough, which is just perpetually filled. Because you're not just washing the dishes from all the people eating, you're washing all of the dishes from the industrial kitchen that feeds thousands of people a day. So there's just an infinity amount of dirty dishes. That hallway that you have to walk down to get to the station was just packed with push trolleys. And each push trolley was just filled with dirty dishes to the point of falling over. And the worst part of all of this wasn't the impossible workload. And it wasn't even the fact that it was one of those things where the washer hangs down from the ceiling. It's like a spout, and you grab onto it, and the water shoots out the bottom. And it was missing the plastic guard, so all the little metal pieces were scalding hot because you have scalding hot water going through it all day. So for the entire shift, I just had to burn my hand, just grab onto it, and just grit my teeth. That wasn't even the worst part. My coworker, because I was only doing this like 25 hours a week. I was a college student. My coworker is doing this full time. And the entire shift, every second of the shift, I would have to listen to this guy bitch about his life, about how much he hates his wife, how much he hates his kids, how much he hates his car, how far he drives to get to work, how much he hates his job every single day. Ironically, washing the infinite amount of dishes in the little cave that I existed in during that time, that's not the part that my brain thinks of as terrible. It was terrible. It was a shit job, terrible pay. But that man that I had to work with was the worst part of the job. That miserable bastard. He's probably still there right now. All right. Oh, these all got mixed up. The order of these things got mixed up. Damn. All right. Well, after dishwasher, I was a burger flipper. I'm going to put that about C. All right. I moved from the back of house to the front of house. And one of the little restaurants that kitchen provided for was a little burger place. And so I was flipping burgers there for a little while. And then moving up, there's really nothing to say about that position. I would sit there and eat bacon off of the grill. I would flip burgers. It was, as far as food service goes, it's about as brain dead a job as you can get. Again, shitty people I was working with. My manager at that point was this morbidly obese black woman who her hobby was calling the cops on other people in her apartment building. That's all she would talk about, is about how like she caught this person doing this and she caught that person doing that, and how she's snitching on this person. So she can't wait to get home to call the cops on this other person. And she's like trying to get her neighbors evicted. It was miserable. But that position did allow me to make some of the most outrageous, grotesque burgers I've ever made, and then sneak off into some secluded part of the kitchen to eat like a giant triple burger that I made for myself. And also just snagging pieces of bacon off the grill when nobody's looking. And I had my back to the customers, which was the best, so nobody could see me eating the bacon. After that, I moved back into the back of house, and I was a chef's assistant, sous chef, and that's S tier. let's do top of A. Let's top of A. So chef's assistant was awesome. So I was a student at the time, and most of the employees were students. The chef was a professional chef, and then we had maybe 2 or 3 professional cooks, but they all had very specific roles and they didn't interact with the students at all. They would come in, do some specific job, and then leave. But then there were about 20 student employees. And so as the chef's assistant, I had complete reign over the other students. And I didn't have set job requirements. I would come into my shift. I would stand outside the head chef's office. He was an awesome guy. His personality is what made it a good job. He was a good chef to work for. He, I suppose, as most chefs, was chronically underprepared because of the limitations of management. They were never ordering the right food. It was never arriving on the day it was supposed to be there. Every single day he had to make do with the ingredients we had on hand rather than actually being able to follow the set recipes and the things that we were supposed to make something with XYZ ingredients, and we only have like 8 of the 10 ingredients we need. And so he has to get creative in order to make a dish that's as similar to the original dish as possible while still missing some of the ingredients. This is despite the fact that we got like a 7-foot tall pallet of food every single morning. Just ridiculous amount of food going through this place. I used to make chili by the cauldron. We had an enormous pneumatic cauldron that would hold 100 gallons of chili at once. And you'd press a button and the hydraulic system would lift it up and it would all drain out of one quarter, and we'd drain it into these huge buckets to save overnight and then supply it to whatever restaurant it was going to the next morning. So this job was awesome because I had so much authority. I would hang out outside the chef's office for the first like 30 minutes of the day. I would make sure that jobs are getting done, just general dictation, make sure that the fries are getting pre-fried and this, that, and the other, make sure things in the walk-in are all dated and inventoried correctly. But usually about 30 minutes in, he would come out of his office after smashing a couple of cups of coffee, and he would just give me a piece of paper with scribbling on it. And the piece of paper would be what he wants me to make. He knows how long my shift is. He would give me an amount of work that was appropriate to my shift, and then he'd recommend some things. He's like, I recommend you do this like this. I recommend you chop this like this. I recommend that you grab about 4 people for this job or 5 people for this job or 3 people for this job. And then the rest was just totally up to me. I went back into the kitchen where all these student employees are working. I'm like, you're chopping onions. You're doing this. You're doing this. You're doing this. It was a great job. I don't know how long I did that. That was probably 1 semester or maybe 6 months. Then I graduated college and I went back to the East Coast where I hate that these are all in different orders. All right. I think this is where I was. Beer and wine store was the next one. Beer and wine store, C job. So this was a little mom and pop beer and wine store, stocking shelves. When I didn't want to be bothered, I would just hang out in the walk-in because it was freezing cold in there. It was really nice. And this is Maryland where it gets really hot in the summertime. And yeah, we made some food. We made some okay sandwiches. The guy who owned the place was really chill. It was a really laid-back job, very low pay, so pretty dead end, but nothing bad to say about it, really. We had lots of people coming in and stealing stuff. The owner would encourage me to try to stop that. But I'm like, look, bro, you're paying me like $10 an hour. I'm not getting in the way of a thief who wants to steal an Old English 40. We did have beer and wine reps who would come by. Now, I don't know how those people get hired, but it would seem to me that they almost never did their job. It would seem like 60 or 70% of the time, the beer and wine rep either wouldn't show up or would show up and leave immediately. And every time they didn't do their job, the owner would tell me to step in for their role, and that was awesome. So I don't know how you get hired to be a beer and wine rep, but that's a dope job because you just stand around drinking all day with strangers. You know, whatever the wine is, whatever the beer is that we're supposed to be having on display, you just sit there and you just drink with people as they come and go from the store, and you just talk up the beer and try to get them to buy it. It's a great job. Anyway, didn't do that for very long. Went, I think, into, this is after college, so I went into a serving position, and that goes F tier. Italian restaurant as a server. I got trained for about 2 weeks, I would say, like a long training period. And anybody who's been a server before, you know that you're shadowing somebody and then they give you like a small part of a less valuable section. Well, my first legit day of work where they gave me my own actual section, you know, hypothetically, I could have half a dozen tables of people. I could make some real money today, finally. On that day, some businessman comes in, has me push together all the tables in my section, sits there for, I don't know, I think I was only working like a 5-hour shift that day. He sat there for nearly the whole shift before his party came in. They ordered over $1,000 worth of booze, didn't tip, left. And in that restaurant, 0 tip, not even $1. In that restaurant, we own a tip pool. So since I got tipped 0, I still owed money to the pool, and that money came out of my hourly, which was whatever it was, $4 an hour. So I lost money at the end of that shift, and I just quit on the spot. Went right to the manager, and after we worked out what the tip pool was, and I realized I just worked a 5-hour shift and lost money, I was like, I'm done. Goodbye. Left there. Domino's is where I went, I'm quite sure, next. Another shit job. Really bad job. Domino's looks like a restaurant and they look like they make pizza, but they're actually a factory that just happens to make pizza. The Domino's that I ended up at, I worked at a couple different ones, but the one I ended up at, they would do like 150 or 200 pizzas per hour during their rush. I had a 31-second pepperoni time. That means 31 seconds to go from a ball of dough to a finished pizza with the correct amount of pepperonis on it into the oven. Ball of dough into the oven, 31 seconds. And that was hopelessly too slow. It was so slow that during a rush, I was phone bitch, which everybody was. It wasn't just me, I promise. Everybody. What phone bitch means is you pick up the phone about 30 minutes before rush starts, and then you don't put it down again for 4 hours. And all 6 lines are just ringing off the hook, and you just take orders from 30 minutes before rush till 30 minutes after rush. And during that time, the place is a zoo to a degree. It's a level of chaos that's hard to comprehend. And then what's even better is, because I wasn't just phone bitch, I was also a moron who volunteered for the closing shift. I made a lot of bad mistakes in my life. But the rush ends, everybody leaves. If you're on a closing shift in Domino's, almost 100% chance you're working completely alone. It's just you and the delivery drivers, which means the place doesn't close until like 1 a.m. And from 8 p.m. onward, you're taking walk-in orders, you're taking phone orders, you're taking internet orders, you're making all of the food, making sure it gets cooked correctly, packaged correctly, delivered correctly, you're routing the delivery drivers. On top of all of this, you have to start doing all the closing duties as well, which means even though we close at 1 o'clock, at like 11 o'clock, you need to start cleaning and doing inventory and doing the next day's prep work. And you have to do all the financials as well. And you have to do a money deposit at the end of the night. And lots of these responsibilities conflict with each other. You'll get partway through cleaning something and somebody will order something. You have to completely undo that. You'll get partway through inventory and then somebody will order something that requires that inventory piece. And then you'll have to undo that and redo the inventory order. And you can't, it's not simple as you just, oh, well, why don't I just leave it until 1 o'clock? Because then you'll be there until fucking 3 o'clock every night. And that's not an option. That is a shit job. Domino's is brutal. The way that Domino's succeeds, at least in the area that I grew up in, is that the franchisees offer the general manager a percentage cut of the store's profits. And these stores make a shitload of money. And so all of the Domino's in my area were extremely profitable, fantastic businesses to own. And the managers were all young, hungry dudes with no college degree who realized that as long as they're capable of working 80 to 100-hour weeks at Domino's, which is a hell of a grind, they can make six figures. So, all of the management is extremely dedicated. That's the reason, that's like the glue that binds the Domino's franchise together. And then that's on top of a mountain of, of indentured servitude. Everyone else gets treated like shit. Anyway, I eventually quit Domino's. I went back to the Italian restaurant, and this time I demanded that they give me a management position. I walked in knowing that they had more stores. It was a mom and pop place. They had like 7 locations, but I think they only had, 5 or 6 managers. So they were missing at least one. And I came back into the store. I was like, look, I know that you guys need a manager, and that's the only position that I'm willing to take. And they hired me. And this would be like a high B, low A job. Let's do high B. And so being the manager, it is less toil. That's obviously true. I'm not, our pizza guy, Tuesday was pizza day. He'd make 250 pizzas before noon on Tuesday. It's a crazy amount of work. The chef and the head chef and all these people, they're standing in front of 16 active burners for the entire shift effectively, just micromanaging all these different meals that are being made. And it's incredibly chaotic. It's just an incredible amount of work, all the other positions. The thing about management is your job is not to operate the restaurant. Every position in the restaurant has some expert that's been doing it for years. Your job is to stay out of their way, 1. 2, understand what troubles they have and how you can support them. As a manager, your job is to support these people. The guy making pizzas stands literally 8 inches behind me. Where I'm standing at the cash register, the pizzas are being made right behind me. If I take one step back, I'll be in his way. And knowing what he needs from me in order to make his job easier, that's a big part of being a manager. Other than that, your job is to interact with the customers and put out fires. Because as a manager, there's going to be problems literally nonstop. Every single day is going to be a cascade of catastrophic problems. And it's your responsibility to fix all of them. And I'm not going to lie, I do love the food service industry. If it wasn't so abusive and the pay wasn't so bad, I wouldn't have a problem staying in the food service industry because I love the people that I work with. The characters that you meet in the food service industry and the type of character development you'll get is such that if I had kids, I would force them to work food service jobs for at least a year or 2. At least. If you want to work part-time, do it for 2 or 3 years. If you're willing to do 40 or 50 hours a week, just give me 1 year. That's what I would tell my kids. I'm like, just make a deal with me. Give me 1 year. Go work in a restaurant for 50 hours a week for 1 year and volunteer for everything. By the end of the year, I want you to have spent time doing every job in the restaurant. It will make you a better person. And in the moment, it kind of sucks because it's very toilsome, very intense, laborious, unthankful work. But in hindsight, you're going to love the memory because, not least of all the people you meet. We had a delivery driver who was legitimately a meth head. He was missing almost all of his teeth, and he would deliver the food truck to the restaurant, I think twice a week. And every single time it was a disaster. He was never there on time. He never unloaded the correct food. He never put it away correctly. There was one day when he had what I can only assume is like a psychosis, like a crazy breakdown. And I could see through the window of the restaurant, he's out in the parking lot, just flinging food off the back of the trailer. Like entire pieces of salmon, just frisbeeing pieces of salmon out into the parking lot. So that's the type of shit you have to deal with as a manager. And if you can keep your cool and handle all that shit, then it's the best job in there. And obviously you're getting paid more. So that's that. Okay. Then I left America. During that job is when I realized I worked that Italian restaurant management job for about 14 months. After college, I was home for a total of like just under 2 years, or maybe 18 months or so. And at this point, I had already visited China and backpacked around for a couple of months. And during that time, I made a lot of connections, agents who can find me a job, schools that are hiring, other expats who can get me connected. And so I got my TEFL teaching certificate, teaching English as a foreign language, while I was working at that job as the manager. And during that 14 months, I also dedicated myself to investing, personal finance. And I gained enough expertise that knowledge really changed my life going forward. And then I bounced out of America and I landed in Wuhan, China. And that's where I taught teaching in China adults. This, S tier, this is the best job I've ever had, hands down, and not even close. Where do I even begin? I would frequently work 90 minutes a week because I was lecturing 90-minute lectures. It was often that I would get one lecture a week. I think the most the university ever scheduled me was, I want to say like 4 lectures. What is that? 6 hours a week of work. I was in a 6-room apartment with a balcony, my own kitchen, my own washer, in the middle of Wuhan. In the district of Wuhan I was in, there are more people than all of New York City. I was in Guanggu. I just mispronounced it, even though I lived there for 4.5 years. I was in Guanggu Square. There's like 9.5 million people just in Guanggu, just in that district of the city. And I was living in the middle of the city in a giant apartment that I didn't pay rent on, that I didn't pay utilities on. I had about 6 months of paid vacation per year for the 4.5 years I was there. Full pay. And this is partially because we work on the public school schedule. So I get summers and winters off. But also if I'm teaching freshmen, they have mandatory military training for the first month. So that semester is a month shorter. And then on top of all of this, I would actually organize a little like pseudo union among the teachers. So I knew that the school would be pressuring teachers to re-sign contracts in such and such month. And so about a month before that, I would go to all the teachers and say, look, the school is going to try to make you sign a contract, a new contract, renew your current one. And they are going to pressure you to do that so that once you sign it, they can use that as an excuse to not allow anyone else to change their contract, because then they could claim it's unfair. So if you agree to delay signing a new contract for a month, I'll go talk to the school on our behalf. And in all 4 years I was there, I did this 4 times. I got all the other foreign teachers to agree not to sign a new contract. And then I went to the school and represented the teachers. And 4 years in a row, I got our contracts improved. More holiday pay, less work, less office hours, less commitments, more benefits, everything. Improve the contract in every conceivable way every year. So that goes to show you what leverage can do and negotiation can do. Also, teaching adults was awesome. I was teaching, most of them were about 20 years old. They had been learning English for many years. They had extremely good English. Even the worst students in the class had conversational English. And the classes were all oral English. I wasn't doing any grammar. They had Chinese teachers for that. And so they were mostly public speaking classes, or I was lecturing American history. That started in my second year and went all the way through my 4th year. In my second year, they came to me and they're like, hey, we need someone to teach an American history class. You're American. I was like, good enough. Obviously, you're using a Chinese textbook. So it was 1776 to 1945. So it was extremely abbreviated in one semester. And the section, it was one textbook that had American, English, French, German history. So like the history of 10 different foreign countries in one textbook. But that job was amazing. I would go to my one lecture a week, which was often the case, and just chill with my students. And I had this open policy where I would make a group chat for my class, and I never took attendance because I don't believe in it. These are adults. They're paying to be here. And I told them that on day one, if you have something better to do, go do it. You're an adult. Furthermore, you're paying the school. The school is paying me to be a service to you. And how effectively you use that service is up to you. And so I would, between all my classes, I would have like somewhere between 50 and 150 students per semester. And I would make the same deal with them every year, which is sort of like a backhanded deal because I know most people won't take it and it wouldn't be valid if they did. But I would make this group chat for everybody and I'd say, as long as you speak English in the group chat, I will reply. If you ask me a question in Mandarin, I will not reply. Furthermore, if you ever need help with something directly, if you're writing an essay, if you're making a speech, if you're applying to a school, if you're applying to a company and you want me to look at your application, anything, come to me and I will dedicate as much time as needed to help you with that issue. Now, the only reason I could make that offer is because if I had 100 students, only 3 of them would take me up on it. And I would move heaven and earth to help those 3 students. But obviously, if all 100 took me up on it, I'd have to rescind the offer because I just don't have that much free time. But even to this day, just like 2 years ago, or maybe even just a year ago, I had a student reach out to me and she wrote an essay for whatever she wrote an essay for. And she wanted me to look at the essay. And I looked at it and I edited it and sent it back to her. Once a student, always a student. But it's extremely satisfying. And that's the reality of teaching at any age group. Most of the students don't care, but the few students who do care, they make it all worthwhile. And honestly, I think it might be a little overwhelming if you're in an environment where all the students cared. Like, that might be a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, oh man, I don't know if I can handle 100 sincere students. Okay, so that's what I would do during the week, teaching adults. All right. Now, here we go. Long fall, teaching kids. F tier, the lowest low of F tier. So if higher is better, it would probably be like this order, where teaching kids, I think, is the worst job I've ever had, followed very closely by washing the dishes for 8,000 strangers a day, followed by Domino's and then the server. Teaching kids in China, first of all, it pays 2, 3, 5 times as much as paying adults. A lot of places you can get $100 an hour without a negotiation just for singing the ABCs. Now, why is it so well paid? Because teaching kids sucks. It's a shit job. It is. You have to understand that these kids are so young that they barely even speak Chinese. It's a status symbol to have your 4-year-old learning English. And to exacerbate things, all of these private schools are in renovated apartment buildings, and because of communism, all of the buildings are just solid concrete blocks. I'm talking about walls that are 18 inches thick, solid poured concrete, reinforced concrete. So you're in literally a concrete box with 40 screaming children. I have PTSD from the noise. I have heard a shotgun blast indoors. I have been to heavy metal concerts and stood in front, or EDM concerts and stood in front of the speakers. I have heard a jet-powered drag race car, and that went by me, I don't know, 150 feet away from me. A concrete box with 40 screaming children is hilariously louder than any of those other things. And I want to pressure the word hilarious, because there's a point at which something is so loud, it's not painful anymore. I was having out of body experiences. There were days, and you could see it. You could see the wheels turning, and it's like cogs are turning, and then like the machine gets stuck, and there's like a moment where there's nothing happening, and then everything just breaks. And you could see it. Some kid would be communicating, and they'd reach the edge of their communication, and you'd see them struggle. And then they would get to a point of frustration where they're not trying to communicate anymore, and they would just scream, ah! And then some other kid would be talking to one of the other teachers, and now they can't communicate because this kid's screaming, and they start screaming, and another kid, and it's a cascade. And when I say screaming, I'm not saying that they were just trying to be loud. I'm saying screaming with the type of effort that you look at the kid and you're like, I don't know if this kid's gonna survive this scream. Like veins busting out of their necks, like maximum effort scream. Everything, every fucking ounce of energy they have. I can still feel the reverberations of that noise in my soul. There were many days when the noise would get so loud that I would look at the other teacher, the Chinese teacher, and the Chinese teacher would look at me, and even the Chinese teacher was in disbelief. Like, I thought that it couldn't get any louder, and they just proved me wrong. On a daily basis, they're just shattering your perception of what loud is. Oh, I thought this was loud. Oh, I thought this was loud. It's like, this was painful, and then it becomes confusing, and then it becomes, you go into like a realm of mania, and I'm looking at myself from above. I'm looking down on myself. Like, this level of noise has actually driven me insane. So anyway, needless to say, I didn't teach kids very much. Only on Saturday and Sunday, and I would limit it to about 4 to 6 hours. Because if you're going to pay me $100 an hour, I'm going to do it, even though it sucks. So teaching kids in a concrete box in China, bad job. Bad fucking job. That job sucked. Another job I had while I was in Wuhan, I worked for a Wuhan social media company. This was like a low A, maybe high B. This was a very temporary job for some very shisty people. An American owned this company. He was a real sketchy dude. Didn't trust him as far as I could throw him. But I came on and I did some social media videos for him once a week for his program. And I'm sure those are findable somewhere on the internet, where I would talk about, like, in this upcoming week in Wuhan, and I would talk about all the various things that you could go do, all the different events and promotions. And then that culminated before the company sort of fell apart and I walked away from it. The company was known for throwing big parties, and some huge bar had just opened up with some wealthy woman, and the owner of the company somehow had a connection. I don't know. I ignored those details. But the point is, they put me in charge of organizing and managing an enormous fucking party. So at that bar, we threw a massive rager, and I ended up taking home 10% of the take for the night as my payment. So that was nice. That was beautiful. That was a great night, great memory. I don't have that much to say about that social media company. It was a very, like, in, out. I was in there for a few months, did some interesting things, and then out. You know, that's what happens when you work for people that you can't trust. It's, no matter how much you enjoy it, you can't put down roots because you know that you can't trust the people. And there were technically 2 owners to the company, but there was technically only one owner of the company because there was no contract. There was just a handshake agreement between these 2 guys who had been working this social media company for years. And like in those, I don't know, I was with that company maybe 5 or 6 months. In that time, I brought it up maybe twice, where it was just me and those 2 guys in the room. I was like, so you guys don't have a contract? And each time the guy who actually owns the company would be like, that's not necessary. We'll take care of that another time. Let's not let's not, he always wanted to push it under the rug. Sketchy dude. So I never felt like that was going anywhere because I never felt like I could trust the boss, which in hindsight, it was true. I couldn't trust the boss. All right. So then I got a terrible feeling in my gut, and all of my biggest decisions I allow my gut to make for me. And in the second half of 2019, I got this sensation in my stomach that it's over. The China experience is over. And it's time for me to get the fuck out of here right now. I'm telling you, that's how it was. I had the most amazing job. I had a great relationship. I had a great social life. I loved the city. I loved living in China. I loved the lifestyle. This up here, this is the happiest I've been since I was a child. I have to go back to memories from like middle school to be as happy as I was here. This was better than when I was in college. Those 4.5 years in Wuhan, so far the best years of my adult life. So when I say that I listen to my gut, I'm telling you, I really listen. I had everything in the world going for me, and I was like, it's time to leave right now. And I broke up with my girlfriend, who I loved very much, and I quit my job, which I loved very much, and I left all the friends that I had made and all the business contacts I had worked so hard for, and I abandoned it completely. Got back to the US, and a couple months later, COVID broke out. Now, in those couple of months, I worked 2 jobs. I worked Home Depot, and I taught online for a Korean company. Home Depot. To be clear, I worked in the lumber section of Home Depot. This is a great job. This goes like a high A. It's a job maybe even above sous chef. Maybe not. Lumber section of Home Depot. First of all, I just love Home Depot. I love the smell of the wood. I'm sure if I was working in a different section, I would hate it more because the lumber section, especially the early morning, I would get there at like 5 a.m. and we had the morning shift with all the contractors and all of the actual professionals coming through. And that's similar. It's the service industry where you have all these crazy characters that you work with, and those characters are what make the job fun. Furthermore, if you're ever in Home Depot and you can't find an associate in the section that you're in, it's because that associate is very likely intentionally not there. If I ever felt like I needed a break, I would just wander the store. Because while we're told to help people, regardless of what section we're in, we're also pretty explicitly told to like stick in your bailiwick. If I'm the lumber section guy, I'm really only supposed to be helping lumber people. And so if I'm walking through the gardening section and someone's like, hey, can I get your help? I say, no. I'll find the garden section guy and tell him to come here and help you. But I'm in lumber. So anytime I needed a break, I would just walk around the store. And I just love being in Home Depot. I will say, and I hope that this doesn't get me fucking sued. These are just my opinions. Home Depot is not a safe environment for children. Unless you have children who are extremely situationally aware and they're very aware of their environment and they're not going to, run under a forklift or something, don't bring them to Home Depot. The amount of people that I saw nearly killed on a daily basis is staggering. Home Depot is probably the most dangerous place I've ever worked. On a daily basis, people would walk underneath loads. They would walk in between, imagine a forklift here, and the forklift is holding a pallet of wood, which the driver of the forklift cannot see past because there's a wall of wood. And then on the other side, there's steel and concrete columns. And even though I'm standing there with 2 flags, like, stay where you are, some asshole will look at me with this cheeky smile like, ooh, I'm doing something I'm not supposed to. And then this cocksucker will go in between the unstoppable force and the immovable object. And I'm standing there like, oh my God, I'm going to watch this 50-year-old dad get crushed to death because he thinks it's a game. He thinks it's a game. He thinks that he's in an environment where his safety is being considered or is being guaranteed. And let me tell you something. In the training material, when you're onboarding for Home Depot, they make it explicitly clear in the training material. And I'm going to try to quote it, but this might not be verbatim, but something like this. It says, our customers are aware and take full responsibility of the fact that they are entering a working warehouse environment and they accept the risks associated. Meaning, if you come into Home Depot and you walk behind a forklift and get crushed to death, it's 100% your fault. And I have to agree. Home Depot cannot be blamed. The people that I interacted with on a daily basis in Home Depot have no survival instincts. None. Anybody who would put themselves in those positions habitually, it was a daily thing. All the employees in Home Depot joke about it amongst themselves. I can't believe that. Did you see that? That guy nearly fucking died in front of us. My battery's about to die. All right, let's give this a break and then let's check back in. All right, we're back. Let me sync this up. Okay. So, Home Depot, dangerous place. Don't take your kids. Seriously, don't. The amount of children that climb into, I could go on and on. All right, teaching online. This was a chill job, probably like low A, not very high pay. This was teaching children as well, but it was all one-on-one with really advanced kids from this Korean private school. And most of them just needed like conversational experience. Oh, I got a sneeze that's right on the edge. Most of them had high conversational skills, and what they wanted me to teach them was more advanced. So these are 10 or 12-year-olds, but a lesson plan might be navigating an airport. And so we would role play all of the different interactions you might have in an airport and have them, of course, in English. And then I was supposed to sort of have fun with them toward the end of the period. And so what I would usually do toward the end of the period is I would find a cool YouTube video. We would watch the YouTube video for 5 minutes or so. And then for 5 or 10 minutes, I would have them describe the YouTube video using their English. So we would watch like a time lapse of a ship being built or of a building being destroyed or something like this. And when we just talk about it, that was a chill job. All right. It was at this point that I abandoned these ideas because like December of 2019 is when everybody from Wuhan knew that something was going down, that the world might be coming to an end. And so I was like, all right, by the end of December, beginning of January, the military was coming into the city and they were blocking off roads and dumping construction debris to block tunnels and bridges. And it was bedlam. And at this point in the United States, people were still arguing that the disease doesn't exist. So at that point, I canceled my plans because up to that point, I was looking at either going to Thailand or Poland. And it was just a matter of who was going to give me a better option to go teach. Once I saw the calamity in Wuhan, I realized that this is going to go global. And the Chinese, I think it was the Lunar Festival was happening around that time. Lunar New Year, I think. So millions of Chinese people were traveling around the world. And I knew that whatever Wuhan was infected with, the whole world was going to be infected with. So something that my father told me when I was very young, which of course he doesn't remember. That's one of the ironies. The lessons that you found most important, chances are your parent doesn't even remember telling you. But I remember being young and my dad told me, there's no reason to bet on the end of the world because if you win, there'll be nobody around to pay you. And that mentality, the mentality is basically optimism, right? Pessimism doesn't pay because if you're right, money might not matter anymore. So I assumed that the world wasn't going to end. I quit my job at Home Depot and I quit the online teaching and I just poured myself into software for 15 hours a day, 6 days a week. And then after 5.5 months of that, and I also took part in a boot camp, which was, other than the connections I made, useless. The other students in the boot camp were the best part of the boot camp. But other than that, everything I learned, I could have just gotten from YouTube. And I did in the end just get from YouTube. So after 5.5 months of that, I got my first software job, which was a startup company in the Midwest. This was, I would say this was like a low C tier job. It was, I think I was getting paid less than 35 grand a year. There was no benefits. I was still working 60 hours a week. There was only one other developer at the company, the head developer. So it was just me, him, and the CEO. The CEO was this absolute madman. He would come into our stand-ups in the morning with some crazy idea he had, and he would give us, without thinking twice, he would give us a week or 2 or 3 weeks worth of work, and he would be like, okay, I expect that to be deployed at 2 p.m. so that I can test it from 2 to 3, and then I can do a presentation to the client at 3 p.m. And we were like, that's impossible. And he just wouldn't take no for an answer. He was like, do it or you're fired. That was always the sentiment. And sometimes I was able to dissuade him and to get him to see reason. Yeah, but at least half of the time I would lose that argument, and he would just be like, do it because I said so. And at the end of the day, you're paying me, so I will do it. Even if you give me something that's impossible, I'll take the money, and then at 2 p.m., I'll just tell you what I told you at 8 a.m. It's not done yet, and it was never going to be. He would emotionally blackmail us because he would claim that they ran, I forget what their primary business was, but the software development, the bespoke development that me and the developer were working on was like a side project of the business. And on a near daily basis, he would tell us that he's going bankrupt paying our incredibly low salaries, and that he just refinanced his house so he could keep us on for a little longer. And this guy would also convince you to do overtime pay and then try not to pay you. But thankfully I was recording the conversation. So then I threatened to report him to the fucking business bureau or whatever government agency that handles that stuff. I'm like, look, I have a recording from Friday of you saying that you were going to pay me for the overtime this weekend. And then on Monday, you're like, actually, we don't have the money for that, but thank you for your work. I'm like, that's not how this works. You're going to pay me. So I and the lead developer got laid off about 7 months into that. Then I moved to Austin, and I had a job in between. Now this one, maybe I should have a second tier, another tier here. Can I add a column? Add a row below. Okay, cool. And this one was like, not worked. This is a special category. While I was still working at that startup, I got another job and got laid off in the same week. This was for a private school that taught software to adults. They were affiliated with some local college. And so they had a Discord that had like 200 students in it learning software, learning primarily JavaScript. So their plan was to hire me and a couple other professional developers. And we were going to work on 8-hour shifts around the clock to provide 24/7, essentially student aid. So we were going to work in 8-hour shifts. 8 times 3 is 24. And we were going to just always have that Discord up. And if any student needed anything, help with anything, that was our job to provide that help. Me and those other developers, we got hired, we got put on the schedule, we worked for 1 week, and then they laid us all off and they just canceled the entire department. They were like, actually, we changed our mind. We don't need this. We don't want this. So that would have been a cool job. And that was, I volunteered for the night hours because I was up all night anyway already. And so that would have been a cool job, but it didn't really come through. Then about a month after I got laid off from the remote startup job, I got a job at Deloitte. I would call this like a low B, maybe a high C. Yeah, maybe high C. Yeah, probably high C. The reason it was high C is because I have never interacted with such a cacophony of bureaucracy. Deloitte was, first of all, not very well paid. I was getting paid substantially less than an engineer should get paid in the industry. But worse than that is I had 4 bosses. Yeah, have you ever seen the movie Office Space where he makes a mistake and he has 4 different people coming by and telling him about it? Not only did I have 4 bosses, but on a month-by-month basis, there must have been at least 100 bureaucratic boxes to check. You had daily, you had semi-weekly, you had weekly, you had semi-monthly, you had monthly, you had quarterly, you had yearly. You had boxes that you checked X amount of time ago that have like an automatic renewal. Like, oh, you did this bureaucratic box check 72 hours ago, but every 72 hours it expires and now you have to do it again. And I think that I missed, in the 2 years I worked at Deloitte, I probably missed half a dozen of these bureaucratic box checks. And when I finally got laid off from Deloitte, I wouldn't be surprised if missing those bureaucratic checks is the reason that they laid me off, or like the reason that they justified it. Because I know that in terms of my actual development work, I did everything that was ever asked of me within the time frame asked, and with up to or above the standard that they were expecting. But the daily, hourly, weekly bureaucratic tornado that's just assaulting you from all directions. And the company moves so slowly, going from the startup environment where the CEO would ask for a feature at 8 a.m. and you'd expect it push to production at 2 p.m. so that he can use it and then show it to the client at 4. Going from that to Deloitte, to illustrate the difference, the first Deloitte project I was on, we were 9 months into the contract. It was a 12-month contract when I joined the project. In the 3 months between month 9 and 12, they hadn't onboarded me for the project. Meaning that 3 months wasn't enough time for them to give me the government laptop, the government security badge, the clearances for the badge, the clearances for the laptop, the access required for the softwares that I need for the laptop, and then access to the various repositories and other parts of the internet that I needed to access, or there was a government contract. So the point I'm making is they bring me on in month 9, and I'm ready to work. I'm in full on sprint mode mentally because of the startup. I'm like, go, go, go. Day 1, I joined the development team. The development team had 13 members and 1 developer. Those 13 members were broke down as 1 developer, 3 managers, and 9 strategists. Not a joke. 9 people whose title was strategist. And as far as I could tell, their only job was to orchestrate PowerPoint presentations and to schedule interviews, and not interviews, rather meetings, Zoom meetings. There were some days when we'd have 8 or 10 Zoom calls in a day, where we would have a scheduled and a sincerely important Zoom call at like 2 o'clock. They would schedule a call at 1 o'clock, at 12 o'clock, at 11 o'clock, and they would be preparation calls. Okay, at 11 o'clock, we're going to go over what we're going to talk about at the 2 o'clock call. And then at 12 o'clock, we're going to go over a PPT that we made in preparation of the 1 o'clock call. And the 1 o'clock call is where we're going to finalize what we're doing in the 2 o'clock call. And even though me and the other developer had nothing to do with this stuff, it's not our job, we still had to be there because none of the strategists were technically inclined. So if there was any meaningful conversation about the work, those 9 people were utterly useless. There were 14 people on that project when I joined. I was the 14th. 2 developers. It was a government contract, $95 million budget. And day one, the developer takes me through what has been done over the previous 9 months. I shit you not, it was based on the speed that we were moving at the startup, it was like a week worth of work, maybe two. A week or two worth of hard ass grinding work. And that's what he had accomplished in 9 months. Anyway, Deloitte is where careers go to die. Deloitte was not a good environment for a developer, especially a developer who wants to hone their skills. Not at all. Okay, so then I got laid off from Deloitte. I was laid off for a long time. The next job I had after that, like sincerely real job, I had a job teaching at a private school that taught software, and they taught software to kids, specifically game development. Now, the company was not good. The owner of the company was a lunatic, and she was allergic to money. She actually had an opportunity in front of her where when she first described the company and the situation they're in my head, I just saw dollar signs. Like, I was like, oh my God, we're going to print money. We're going to be fucking rich. And then she started telling me about the deals that she was making. And this woman's just allergic to money. She, in the time between when she courted me for the position was program coordinator. So my job would have been to train the other teachers and to put together the curriculum of what software to teach the kids and what that all looked like. Between her courting me to hire me for the position and hiring me, she had already signed 15 contracts, and at least 10 of the 15, the company was actually losing money. She was willingly signing contracts where we pay them and instead of them paying us. And she's like, yeah, it gets us good exposure. I'm like, we have 2 students in the classroom. It's not exposure. You're just throwing money away because you don't have the negotiation, communication acumen to go into these contract negotiations and to come out with a worthwhile deal. She got absolutely eviscerated in every deal, every negotiation she went into. And so once I realized that was the ownership of the company, that's when I was like, okay, never mind. All those dollar signs in my head just vanished. I was like, and then I got hired explicitly telling her, I was like, I've got multiple out of the country weddings to go to at the end of the year around November, December. So I just want you to know I'm going to be gone for about 6 weeks, including the holidays. And she's like, no problem, no problem. So I worked for her for maybe 5 months. Then I went on those holidays, and the very first day back in January after the holidays, she fired me. Classic. And then a month or so later after that, she messaged me like, hey, we need help. You want to come in and work? I just didn't respond. I don't have time for that shit. Anyway, so that would be like a low C job, but I'll put it in high C because I will say the kids that we got into that program were inspiring. I've never been so inspired. Seeing what these kids can do with these programs, and I'm talking about full-fledged. They were using Unity, Unreal Engine, Blender. And seeing how productive these 12-year-olds can be in 45 minutes, where they come in and I'm like, what are you going to do today? And the 12-year-old goes, well, I made this landscape last class. He's making a world map for his game. And he's like, well, the greenery that spawns on the land also spawns underwater, and that's obviously a bug. These bushes and trees shouldn't be spawning underwater. Instead, it should be kelp and water-based plant life. So that's what I'm going to fix today. I was like, what the fuck? And he did. Hammered it out over the next 45 minutes, fixed it. The other kid was like, I want sort of an aura around my character that looks like the character is encased in water that's flowing upward all around him. Like, imagine a Dragon Ball Z character, but instead of like the energy, it's like a water. And that's what he did. He spent the next 45 minutes in Blender making exactly that and then importing it into his game. Boom. I was blown away. So the company, the owner of the company, all of that was a mess. But seeing those kids work and standing over their shoulder and just being blown away was so inspiring. I would leave that school and I would rush home and jump right on my computer and start coding because I was so inspired. And then finally, I did spend a little while back in food service. And, I'll put this at like a high C as well. There's a local pizzeria on 6th Street. Right after I got laid off, I went down there and worked there for a few months until my back disagreed with it. Again, I love food service. I just love the characters. I have great customer service. I love bantering with the customers. The coworkers are awesome. It's just a lot of fun. And so I really advise it to any young people. If you're out of work and you're looking for something to do and you don't have experience in food service, go do it. I will say that it's going to be stressful. It's going to be a lot of hard work, but go in there with the attitude of not taking it so seriously and go in there with the attitude of prioritizing the customer. Any food service establishment that's actually worth a damn, they will prioritize the customer over delivery of the product, if that makes sense. So I'm working in a pizzeria. During the lunch rush, it's a really small pizzeria, so it only needs 20 people for the place to be packed. And it's always better to let the people who are in line wait in line a little bit longer so that you can tend to the needs of the people who have already paid. A customer who's already paid always takes priority over a customer who's waiting to pay and put an order in. So, yeah. Anyway, those are all the jobs I can remember holding over the last, 15 years at this point. Let me know in the comment section down below. Subscribe. 99% of you are not subscribed. And buy my book, Seeking Squalor, Toilet Umbrellas and Champagne Chandeliers on Amazon. And let me know what you thought down below. Teaching in China is the best job I've ever had, and I miss it a lot. It was one of the best parts of my life. Then we got sous chef, Home Depot, social media company, teaching online, managing a restaurant, teaching kids, pizzeria, Deloitte, burger flipper, beer and wine, software startup, Italian, Domino's, dishwashing, shit job, teaching kids, shit job. Don't recommend either of those. And yeah, that's it for today. It's been a long video. I haven't had to switch out the battery in the middle of a video before. This goddamn Sony is so unreliable. All right, everybody, goodbye.